It's nice to meet you finally. We have a full class. We have about 36 students here. And I'm going to let them tell you about the bill that they've chosen. Well, you actually already know, but I want you to hear from their perspective.
Great.
Oh, good. We can hear you. Yay.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, go ahead and tell us about the bill.
What was that?
Or do you want to go ahead and tell us about the bill from their perspective?
Yeah. Who would like to come up and present the bill that we've chosen, kids? Rishi?
No.
You're good. Come on. How about Kadar? Okay. So we have to be able to talk to our legislators. Would you? Come on up. Huh? Well, then we need somebody else. Connor. Okay, I guess civics class is over. See you guys. Oh, thank you, Rishi. You saved our class. This is Rishi. Okay. There.
My name's Rishi, and the bill we chose is to help orcas, and we're trying to get more salmon per year so they have something to eat and we can still see them. So that's mostly our bill.
Sounds great. Good job.
Okay. So we heard that in the news it's gone to the legislature.
It has. So the bill has been introduced, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think that before we do that, we wanted to start by telling you a little bit about what Shelly and I do here in Olympia, and then giving you a little bit of background so that when we explain where the bill is at in the process, everybody understands how it's going to move through the process.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll just introduce myself. My name is Shelly, and this is Chelsea. So we're going to be explaining a little bit about how bills become laws. And first off, I'll just say that I am originally from California, but I've lived in Washington now for several years. So I consider it home. And I am a lobbyist. So raise your hand if you know what a lobbyist is. All right. So a good number of you. So part of what a lobbyist does is they educate legislators. And there are two types of legislators at the state level. Does anyone know what those two types are?
Some fifth graders should know. Yes.
I think one of them is the House of Representatives and the other is the Senate.
Wonderful. Good job. Yes, that's correct. So we have senators who are elected to 4-year terms, and we have representatives who are elected to 2-year terms. And in Washington state, we have 49 legislative districts. We have 2 representatives per district and 1 senator per district. So when Chelsea and I meet with legislators, we're either meeting with a representative or a senator. And they're from one of the 49 districts in Washington state. I'll turn it over to Chelsea to explain a little bit about how the state and the federal government relate to one another. So you guys might all be familiar with the fact that we have a president of the United States. He operates at the federal level. So when you hear that in the news, that's not the individual that we're working with here at the state level. Federal government is run out of Washington on the opposite side of the country. Here in Washington state, we have the governor in state, and the state government. So as Shelly mentioned, that's the level of government that we work with here on a daily basis. And it's a lot different. At the federal level, there are a lot more representatives and senators. We have 2 for Washington state, and then 10 congressional members that represent us over from the entire state over in Congress. But we want to focus today on the state government because that is the mechanism or the level of government that your bill is going to be working through the process here. So our hope today is to give you a little bit of background about how that operates and how it works here in Olympia, so that when we talk about where your bill is at, you have an understanding
of where it's going to go from here. Talk about the bill.
Yeah, so you guys chose a bill, and a lot has gone into developing that bill prior to it even being seen by any of us. So on the first day of session, which was last Monday, bills were officially introduced, and beginning at that time is when bills are made public, and individuals can begin weighing in on what they think about the bill, whether it's good or bad, or whether they have other thoughts. Prior to that, individuals come up with ideas about how to change state law. And I'm not sure exactly who brought this idea forward, but they worked with one of their legislators to draft this concept of increasing the number of Chinook salmon so that there's more food for orcas to eat. And the concept here is that if there's more salmon for orcas, then there will be more orcas. Does anyone know how many southern resident orca whales are in the Puget Sound right now, or have an idea of how many there are? Kind of a hard thing to know, but scientists have estimated that there are only 76 orcas in the Puget Sound right now. And so it's a pretty small number compared to what it used to be. And the hope is that by increasing the amount of salmon, will increase the number of orcas. This bill directs the legislature to provide $1.5 million to buy salmon. And that buys 10 million salmon. So that's a lot of salmon that will hopefully end up in the Puget Sound to feed orca whales.
So with that background, we want to talk about where your bill is at and where it's going to go from here. So we're going to actually pull up the legislative website so that we can look at your bill. So we'll start by going to the main legislative website. We'll give it just a minute here. So we are at ledge.wa.gov, and you all are probably more familiar with using the internet than we are at this point. But we want to walk you through this step so that if you guys are at home and you're talking to your parents about the bill that we're working on, that you can show them exactly where it's at in the process just by accessing the legislature's website online. So we start by going to ledge.wa.gov, and then over on the right-hand side of the page, underneath the various categories there, you would click bills. And then you would type in our bill number, which is 2417. Now, right next to the bill number, it says 2017 to 2018. You'll want to make sure that it says that because that signifies that we are in the 2017-2018 legislative cycle, and then you'll hit search. And this is the page that you will see that shows you everything you need to know about our bill and where it's at in the process. So you see HB 2417 there at the top that's highlighted, and that means House Bill 2417. Then you'll see that the description of the bill is concerning Southern resident orca recovery. So that is a brief description or the title of the bill that helps legislators when they are looking at the bill very briefly, know what it's talking about. Below that, you see sponsors. And those are the individuals that have signed on to the bill to designate or explain and show other legislators that they are supportive of the bill. So the primary sponsor, the first person listed there, is Representative Blake, and he lives over in the Aberdeen area in Southwest Washington. It's a more rural area, so he cares more about these sorts of topics like orca recovery. That's probably the reason that he is working on this bill. He also sits on the committee that hears all of the issues about agriculture and water and natural resources. So that's another reason that he probably was interested in your guys' bill. So if that list of sponsors shows you a little bit about who was working on the bill, if you scroll down a little bit more on this webpage, you can see an explanation of where your bill is at. So you can see that it, underneath where is it in the process, you can see that it was introduced in the House and it was heard in committee. So we'll go ahead and scroll down a little bit more. You can see that on January 8th, it was referred to the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. So again, that's Representative Blake's committee. Now, what's important for you all to know is that Representative Blake is the chair of that committee. And that means that your bill is going to have a priority in his committee because he's the one that decides when the bill gets scheduled for a hearing and when it's going to be exec. Now, what execing means is that a bill is first introduced and a committee that is made up of a few members of the legislature that have particular or specialized knowledge about an issue get to hear about the bill. So that gives an opportunity for them to hear from the constituent or the person who cares a lot about orcas, and they can come and testify. So they come to Olympia and they have a couple minutes to talk about the bill and to explain why it's really important to them. So that has happened. That happened in the last week. And it looks as if, going back to the page, today, the bill, give me just a minute here, pull that page back up. Yesterday, the bill was scheduled for executive action or a public hearing, excuse me. So it had its first hearing where all of those stakeholders and people that were interested in the bill had an opportunity to come in and testify and explain why they think it's a good idea or why they think it's a bad idea. So next up, the bill will need to be scheduled for executive action or a vote to determine whether or not the members on that committee want to move it to the next step in the process. So just to let you guys know, we have a couple of weeks in order for that bill to get out of this committee. And it needs to happen quickly because that bill will also need to be considered by the members who are in charge of budget or the purse in the legislature to determine whether or not we have enough money to give 100 or 1.5 million to buy salmon for the orcas. So Shelly and I here in Olympia will be following that bill for you and letting you know as it works its way through that process. And then also advocating to Representative Blake and others so that they know that your guys' class cares. I see a hand there. Do we have a question?
Yeah. Can you come up to the stool?
So, my name is Ayush, and I have been getting this question since the fact that there was $1.5 million. I mean, so that I've heard somewhere on the news that Washington, like they've been having to pay some fine for not paying enough money for education or something. Is that true?
That is true. Do you want me to answer that or do you want to take it?
So that is correct. So according to the Washington State Constitution, Washington's first priority, their primary responsibility, is to pay for basic education, is to pay for you all to be sitting there learning about reading, writing, math. And so in the past, Washington has not made that their primary responsibility. And they have used the money that taxpayers pay and used it for other things. And in this just last year and in this year right now, the legislature is beginning to prioritize basic education, so kindergarten through 12th grade. And they're putting more and more money towards education. Good question. Does anyone else have any questions?
Rishi?
It's the first. My name's Rishi, and have you ever had any favorite bill that you wanted to get signed by the governor?
So I have had a bill that I wanted to get signed by the governor, but it was one that I introduced last year. So I had a client, a city on the other side of the state that really wanted an aquatics facility. They wanted a big park for all of the kids in their community to come to. And they wanted a government body to be able to collect taxes in order to fund it. And in order to do that, we had to change the law to allow them to have the authority, the power to do that. So That bill was introduced last year, and I'm continuing to work on it this year. And my fingers are crossed that we get it passed so that I can go to the governor's office and he can sign the bill into law. And then that community gets to build a giant pool for all of the kids to come and play in. Shelly got a bill signed though, so she'll tell you about her experience.
What is the bill?
The bill number?
No, like, what's the summary of the bill that you want to get signed?
Sure. So it's related to public facility districts. And those are organizations that are created at the local level. So local governments like cities, but it's even smaller than that. And they get the ability to create a ballot that then asks the voters whether or not they support paying more taxes in order to pay for a facility that will create a giant pool. So the bill summary is very simple, but it's kind of technical. Essentially, it says that a public facilities district has the authority to ask the voters whether or not they want to pay for that tax. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, do you have any other questions? Would you want to pay more taxes for a pool? Yeah? Well, we'll ask you when you're 18. Okay, so Shelly will tell you about her bill.
So I worked on a bill last year, and it was again for one of the clients that I represent, and it was changing the definition of veteran so that service members, so men and women who are in the military, when they separate from the military, it helps their transition to find other employment in civil service positions. So police officers or firefighters or county sheriffs. So if they were transitioning from the Army and they wanted to become a firefighter, the bill that I worked on helped them with that transition, making that process a little smoother for them.
Nice.
Are there any other questions either about your bill or the process in general? One of the things that we talked about where your bill is right now. After it gets voted out of committee, which Chelsea mentioned this, but there is a cutoff date on February 2nd. Every bill that has not been voted out of its committee is dead. So it can no longer be considered. So if your bill is not voted out of committee by February 2nd, then it'll be dead. So we're going to we're going to lobby on your behalf and try to get that bill out of committee. Once it gets voted out of committee, it goes to the House floor. And every member of the House of Representatives has the opportunity to vote for or against the bill. If it gets the majority of votes in the House, then it goes over to the Senate. And it has a public hearing in a Senate committee and would then be hopefully voted on by the Senate committee. And then once out of the Senate committee, goes to the Senate floor. And if it passes the Senate floor, then it goes to the governor's desk. So that's kind of how the overall process works. Anyone have any questions about the process or your bill?
We have a few kids leaving for patrol. Come on up. We have some questions. Is there anybody else that needs to go to patrol? Okay.
My name is Ming, and does the Senate committee have a cutoff date that the bill will be dead?
Yes, that is a great question. So there are several cutoff dates throughout the process. February 2nd is the cutoff date for the House of Origin. So if you guys remember, our bill is called the House Bill 2417. There are bills that are called Senate bills, and they have other numbers. And if your bill is a House bill, it means it started in the House, and you have to get it out of committee by the House of Origin cutoff. When it gets over to the Senate, it has to be out of the Senate committee by a particular date as well. And I don't remember that date off the top of my head, but I will say it's going to be somewhere in mid-February. So it's going to be very, very quickly approaching after February 2nd.
And I'll just add, so right now we are in a short legislative session. So here in Olympia, we work on a 2-year cycle. So the first year is a long session. It's 105 days. And then the second year, which is what we're doing right now, is a short session and it's 60 days. So those cutoff deadlines that Shelly just talked about come up much quicker when we are doing a short session. What that means for you all is that we have to work really hard to make sure that your bill gets out of the committees and gets voted on as quickly as possible. Otherwise, we run out of time. So we are going to be working as hard as we can to make sure that your bill keeps moving and that we meet that 60-day requirement for it to get all the way through the process and signed by the governor. And if it doesn't, then it's something that you have to work on the following year. So we'll do what we can to make it move through the process. But go ahead.
I'll just add that the way the system is designed is to make it very difficult to create new laws. So both at the federal level, which Chelsea referred to earlier, and at the state level, it is a lengthy process, and it is a time-constrained process, so that only the best ideas make it all the way through into law.
Thank you.
We have some 3rd graders in there. Did I hear we have 5th graders in the class as well?
Yeah, it's 4th and 5th. We gave priority to the 5th graders because the civics is part of their regular curriculum.
Got it. Okay, so we are very familiar with percentages then at this point. I believe last session, it was a 13% passage rate. So that means you have 100% of the bills that are introduced, only 13% pass at the end of the day. So that is not very many. And as Shelly mentioned, it's because our government is set up so that you have to have a lot of people supporting an idea before it changes the law. Because it's really difficult to change the law once it's already put into place.
Okay, we have another question.
Good question.
Does the governor normally veto the bill or not?
That's a good question.
Go ahead.
So the governor does occasionally veto bills. Now, what's good about the bill that you guys all chose is that the governor included some funding for ORCA recovery in his budget that he proposed in December. So to explain that a little bit, every year, the governor puts forward a budget. Every 2 years, it's a big budget, and then the year after, it's a small one. So this year is a small one. It's called supplemental. And this year, the governor included funding for ORCA recovery in his budget. Now, the Senate and the House will come up with their budget proposals, and we'll see if they also included money for ORCA recovery. But what that means, or what that signals to us, is that the governor cares about ORCA recovery if he's spending money in his own budget for it. So if this bill makes it all the way to his desk, not only is he not going to veto it, but he's going to sign it with a big smile on his face. So I think that we are safe if we get the bill all the way there, the governor will be supportive. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Good question. Okay, come on up. If you have a question, I want you to line up right over here, and then when the seat is empty, you can just come right up.
My name is Brad, and I wanted to ask, how long does a bill usually become how long does a bill become a law?
Good question. So when a bill idea is first introduced, that's at the beginning of session. And if it's a short session, then the bill makes it all the way through the process. It usually takes about 60 days. After that, there's the option for the bill to have an immediate implementation. So the day the governor signs it, the bill could become law. More often than not, bills become law 90 days after the governor signs it into law. So roughly 3 months after the governor signs the bill, it's then law.
It can take a couple months, or it can take several months for it to become a law.
So, again, my name is Ayush, and I actually have a question that might be important to me. So some people say that when a governor or a president vetoes something, he writes veto, or does he actually just take the giant red stamp and stamp?
I don't actually know what he does. I don't think he doesn't do anything.
I don't know what he does either, actually, but we can find out and get back to you. That's a really good question.
My name is Siana, and I was wondering when when the idea of this bill got started, and like when the orca population started going down.
That is a really good question. The orca population has been declining for several years. And every year here at the legislature, there's always different ideas of how to increase the orca population. So I don't think that this is a brand new idea this year, but I know that there are several bills actually being considered in the legislature this session regarding orca recovery and orca protection. So this is just one of the ideas that's out there right now.
Perhaps at our next meeting, which is in a couple weeks here, we can give you a little bit of information about some of those other bills. Because as we move forward in the process, there is a chance that some of them will advance and some of them will not. So we can definitely let you know what's happening with some of those other ideas about how to.
My name's Rishi again, and if a bill gets vetoed, is it dead or like ever? It can't get signed by the governor, no matter what.
No, technically, it still has a chance. So if the legislature by 2/3, correct, by a 2/3 majority decides that they really, really care about the bill, they can do what's called an override. And they can take one additional vote to say, no, Governor, we really care about this issue and we want it to pass. So then they all take a vote, and if it passes there, then it can still become law. Or another way that it can continue to be pushed, that the governor might veto a bill 1 year, and then the legislature or the legislators that worked on it the following year, or during that year, go and meet with the governor, and they say, this is a really important issue to us. What did you not like about the bill? And then they change the bill so that it meets his needs and addresses his concerns. And then the following year, they'll bring the idea back in a slightly different form. So there's lots of ways to get around a governor veto.
But when it's vetoed, if the governor doesn't like it and they try to change it, but he still doesn't really care, won't it be vetoed again? And the governor, he or she, will try to make the bill die because it like gets annoying or something. It just gets tired.
So if the governor vetoes a bill and it goes back to both the House and the Senate, and both chambers have a 2/3 majority that overrides the veto, then it's law. It does not go back to the governor after a veto override. And that actually happened. The governor vetoed, I think, almost 13 bills last year, 2 years ago. And all 13 of those bills ended up going back to the House and the Senate chambers. And they did a veto override on all 13 of those bills, and they became law.
Look at that smile. Don't worry. If the bill gets all the way to the governor, it will not be vetoed.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Rishi.
So it looks like we have just over a minute. Maybe one more question or two more questions?
Yeah, two more.
Okay.
Do you think that the governor will sign or veto?
I think that if the bill gets all the way to the governor, that he will sign it into law. What I think we should talk about, though, is the fact that it's very difficult to get it all the way to the governor. The biggest challenge that you face is those deadlines of moving the bill through the process before each of those cutoffs. So I think that our challenge is to get it to continue to move forward and get exec'd out of committee and then move to the floor for a vote and then move to the Senate for a committee. All of that is challenging because you have really quick turnarounds or really quick deadlines. But then once it gets to the governor, I think he'll sign.
Okay, thank you. And last question.
I was wondering if we could help by making it past the committee. What we can do to make it pass.
That's a really great question. So right now it had its public hearing yesterday, but one of the things that you guys could do is you could draft a letter to the committee members and let them know that you support the bill. The other thing that you could do is once if the bill advances out of the House and goes to the Senate, either Chelsea or I can testify at the public hearing and let the committee members know that this is a bill that your class supports. And at that point, you guys could send a letter letting the committee members know that this is important to you guys. You could also email your own legislator and let them know that you care about this bill.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. So we meet in between sessions that we meet with you. So we're going to work on some emails and some letters. And also I plan to have the kids maybe make some posters to bring this to awareness of the other members of our school.
Wonderful.
Oh, great. Sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Okay.
You're welcome.